space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise.
All right, so we're out of pilot season. We're moving on to the first produced episode, regular episode of Star Trek, the original series. This one is called Corbomite Maneuver. It actually aired 10th in the first season, but it is the first regular episode in production, so it was the third episode produced after the two pilots. It was directed by Joseph Sargent, written by Jerry Soule, and this is the episode called the Corbomite Maneuver, where exploring a distant region of space, the Enterprise is threatened by Baylock, commander of a starship from the First Federation. Clay, you're here to talk about this one. How are you?
I am here.
Clay is a puppet on a ship with a small child.
I will give you 10 of your Earth minutes worth of my time.
And right after this, me and Clay are going to come back. We're going to break down the Corbomite Maneuver.
Reporting, sir. Sensors show it as solid, but its composition is unknown to us.
Lieutenant Uhura?
Hailing frequency still open, sir. I get no message from it.
Navigation. Distance from us, 1,593 meters, position constant.
Each of its edges measures 107 meters. Mass a little under 11,000 metric tons.
Scotty.
Motive power? Beats me what makes it go.
I'll buy speculation.
I'd sell it if I had any. That's a solid cube. How something like that can sense us coming, block us, move when we move, it beats me. That's my report.
There's something that differentiates TOS from TNG. TOS came into its own and developed its tone almost immediately, which is shocking to me. What'd you think about what'd you think about the episode? And I guess specifically, how'd you think that, has the show come together yet, in your opinion? Is it missing something that you expected?
No, I think it's all there. And that was what surprised me the most. I know the last episode I was on, I had been talking about Mantrap in that way, but this one being, I had watched a little bit of Where No Man Has Gone Before, and I saw what you were saying. Oh yeah, it's got a very similar vibe to the original pilot, but I feel like whatever they did between the pilot and this episode, they just really locked it down, because it's pretty much all there.
Yeah, I think that Corbomite is actually the best pilot of the three, if you were to consider them all pilots. This one, A, I think is the best story. B, has all the characters in place. And C, it's sort of, it does the best job of explaining what the show is in a lot of ways. It has the story is very much about the sort of the mission of the ship to discover, new forms of life and interact with them and everything. And I think it does a really, really solid job of that. Actually, I think this is a really good episode for how early on in the run it is. To run through a couple of things that are new to this episode, this is the first appearance of Bones, Uhura, and Rand, the yeoman. This is the first appearance of those bridge sounds, which is funny. And this is the first time that the ship has fired its phasers. But yeah, otherwise, Spock has settled into his blue uniform. He seems much more Spock-like, except for the opening scene where he's yelling for no particular reason.
With that weird...
the camera up.
Yeah, there's a couple really weird camera moves in this. That first one that's like... I guess they're just trying to make star mapping look more interesting.
Yes, right. Yeah, with the overhead shot you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like a crane move from the screen over to Spock or something. And then later on, there's a scene where the camera's following Kirk as he gets off the turbo lift and comes back into the bridge. That looks like it's handheld, which is very strange for
I was amazed
television.
that how far camera stabilization has come since the 60s. That crane shot looks like someone with Parkinson's is maneuvering the camera. And the handheld behind Kirk is just, it feels like Blair Witch Project. Everything is just so wobbly in it. But it does stick out like a sore thumb. I guess they hadn't come with the Steadicam at this point or anything. Maybe they have. They just
not for I think about 20 years at that point.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. Or late 70s or early. I think The Shining was the first movie to use the Steadicam, actually.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, like
I could be wrong, but I feel like if it's not the first, it's the first major one.
Yeah, first major thing to come out. Yeah, I think that I like this episode. I think this episode has a couple really big sort of pacing issues with it, and I guess to lead that off, I really like the first half of this one, and once they sort of get into the sequence where they're being towed by Baylock's ship, that is like interminable. It takes so long for that to resolve itself. It goes on, and I think that,
I will say, when I was watching this, my girlfriend came in with about 5 or 10 minutes left, and she said, "Oh, are you watching the second one?" I was like, "No, it's the same one." She's like, "This is the same one."
Yeah. Just because they were being towed in the same shots, or was it just like
I think it was just it seemed extra long for some reason.
Yeah, it does the thing that I don't really like, where the opening is a lot of different scenes, right? There's like, you open with Spock discovering the thing, you see Kirk in sickbay, then Kirk back in his office talking to Bones, and back on the bridge. And once it moves to the bridge, the story just stays on the bridge for 20 minutes until they beam over to Baylock's ship at the end. I think that's really a big pacing problem.
And it's like 40 minutes of, well, not 40 minutes, but it's like 20 minutes of people standing looking at a screen.
Right. Yeah. And you know what's kind of interesting to me is that the TOS stories so far, and granted we've only done a couple of them, they're very simple stories. Like not a lot changes during the course of the narrative. Like there's no monkey wrenches in what happens to them. It's really just this: we encounter the ship, he threatens us, we threaten him back, and then we go meet him. And it's like, that's the entire arc of the story. And it's different from Next Gen, I guess, in a lot of different ways, just because of the modern television. But I don't know. What'd you think of the story in general here? Did you like this one? Did you think it was a little boring?
I liked it because it kind of caught me off guard. I think I've watched this one before in the past. I definitely have, because I always forget that Clint Howard only shows up for the last like 2 minutes of it.
Yeah. The alien puppet is iconic, I think.
Yes, Apparently they hadn't figured out how to do aliens that weren't just gigantic penis heads yet.
Right.
Those are the two major ones so far.
It scares the hell out of me, too.
It's pretty creepy looking.
Yeah, it's very creepy looking.
This one kind of caught me off guard because of the era it was made in, and because it was so early on in the run. I was surprised how I was surprised how light the story was, as far as like the actual, if you can write the plot of this episode in one sentence.
Yeah.
And really not miss much. But the simplicity of the plot allowed for a lot of character interaction, which I was not ready for.
Yes.
Because like we said at the beginning, everybody's already there, and they are written and acted as though they've been acting these and writing these characters for years at this point. Like this seemed like at least a season 2 episode of TNG before you get to anything like this.
Yeah,
as far as character interactions,
it might even take longer in TNG to get.
Yeah, I was trying to explain it to my girlfriend, because she asked me what I thought about it compared to the other stuff, and I was saying how TNG had this problem because in the first season, nobody knew how to write or act these characters or what to do, and they were kind of mandated not to really have them interact with each other that much.
Right.
So you ended up with episodes that were really heavy on plot, and usually moved forward by one character who you're never going to see again.
Right.
And this didn't this had the character that you're never going to see again, but the actual plot was just sort of like a chess game.
Yep.
Or a poker game, for that
matter.
Chess
2 poker, yeah.
And it was just sort of like, here's the situation, and now watch how the stress of the situation affects everybody in the crew and how they react with each other. And I wasn't prepared for something that interesting this early.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a good breakdown, and I think watching the early TOS episodes has made me appreciate how much early Next Gen was trying to copy TOS. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't copying the right aspects of it. Like early TNG is too much focused on, for what the cast of the characters were at that point, it was too much focused on like what the problem was, as opposed to how the characters on that show handled the problem.
Right.
And I think that TOS is, at least so far, TOS is like very big ideas that are very simply told.
Yes.
And they fit them into a 50-minute episode. Sometimes the idea is too big, like where No Man Has Gone Before. The idea was too big and the show couldn't handle it. But it was still a very simple, this guy's a god, we have to get rid of him episode. Mm-hmm. And this one's the same thing, where it's a very big idea that the show is handling. And it gets a lot of time to talk between the characters. This is the first appearance of McCoy. And I think McCoy might be holding my favorite character of the show so far, at least just based on like how DeForest Kelley plays him in this episode.
Yeah, he's pretty great. And one of the things I was wondering, having watched the original pilot, is there a doctor in Where No Man Has Gone Before?
Yes, he's an old man who is forgettable, very forgettable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering, do you think they write the character any different than they did for the one in the original pilot? Because I feel like it's kind of similar, but I just feel like DeForest Kelley knows what he's doing with it, as opposed to the other,
right.
as opposed to that first guy who was just sort of like, I guess we're drinking now. It seems like the relationship that they were going for in the original pilot, they're writing it the same way. It's just that Shatner and DeForest Kelley have much better chemistry.
Yes, I think that the Cage Doctor was much more of a McCoy stand-in than the Doctor in Where No Man Has Gone Before. He was not anything like Bones.
Okay.
And I think it's just the... And I think a lot of it would have to do with just the Kirk character is much more likable than the Pike character was at that
definitely.
point. So there's a lot more play between them. And something we noticed in Where No Man Has Gone Before is that, and this is a huge difference between TNG and this, but Kirk's likability is a huge plus in his character's favor, I think. Mm-hmm. This is the first episode I've noticed where both Spock and Bones call him Jim, as opposed to Captain or Kirk or anything like that.
Oh, really? I guess I missed the Spock one. But
yes, he says it at the end when they're sort of pacing around, considering what to do, and Spock has the line about sometimes there's just checkmate and it's unavoidable.
Oh,
right. He says it before that happened, but yeah, I think that the. I'm going to be mentioning this later on in a different episode too, but the difference between Kirk and Picard is interesting to me. And as someone who grew up with TNG, I kind of always wondered how people could say that Picard is not the better captain. Mm-hmm. And I think watching this as I'm older, I think there's a lot of ways I think that either they kind of failed the Picard character or just Kirk is more dynamic and therefore more immediately interesting.
Yeah. I think from a show standpoint, the difference between Kirk and Pike is that Kirk's likability factor instantly turns the show into an ensemble, because the first pilot feels like the adventures of Captain Pike and some people that work for him.
Right, yeah.
Whereas this one, Kirk doesn't have the sort of, I guess not disdain isn't the right word, but he's not as dismissive of everybody. He enjoys working with these people,
right?
And when he gives when Bailey jumps the gun on the phaser order or something or whatever it was when they're on the bridge and
the conference room scene where he
no, when they're on the bridge.
Oh, okay.
He jumps the gun on plotting the course, or I forget what it was.
Sure.
But anyway, Kirk has to chastise him for it. But he doesn't do it like a hard ass. He does it like the captain, and then after he does that, he kind of gives a smirk,
He delivers I'll hold that into consideration when this is a democracy, and smirks at him.
Yes, that's what it is. Yeah. And it's like, it's just a little bit that makes it seem like, oh, okay. So this is a group that actually works together. He's doing his job. He's being the captain, but he's also being a human about it,
Yeah.
And I think the difference between him and Picard right away is just that he's just a lot more warm than Picard is. Picard has always felt really aloof, even in the last episode of TNG when he wants to play cards with everybody, they're just kind of like, okay,
right.
yeah, why not? Whereas if they did that scene in this show already, I feel like it would be like, oh yeah, come on in, Jim. But it's a lot more. He's a lot more relatable to everybody, I think, than Picard was to his crew. And I don't think that's necessarily a bash on Picard either. I think it's an interesting it's definitely interesting dynamic between the two of them.
Yeah, it's a big change between the two of them, and like the. I guess I do want to come back to this. I don't want every TOS episode to be like a comparison between TNG and TOS.
Right.
And that's my fault for I opened a discussion. We'll come back to it, I think, before we close this off. But I think that the like how this one stands alone is that like, I feel that this is one of the first sort of they have their conference room scene, but they also have the scene where you were talking about. Kirk walks on and it's got the handheld behind him, and he asks for everybody's opinion about what's going on. I like that Scotty just says, I don't know what the fuck is going on, and sort of walks off. The Bailey character has been told to prepare something for him, and he kind of rolls his eyes when both McCoy and Scotty just say, I don't know what this is. Mm-hmm. I think that like what you're saying, the interaction between the crew on this ship is very interesting, and I think a lot of it stems from the fact that the TOS series really feels to me like these guys are in the middle of nowhere, much more than Next Gen did. Like I feel like everything that the TOS group is doing feels new for the first time. Like just the way that the ship, the big ball ship appears for the first time with that great music, that
the music in this episode is fantastic.
Yeah, it's so good. Really, really good. It's a very tense moment when they see that thing that they're encountering for the first time. And
I do. That moment's very tense, but I did really like the moment when the cube shows up for the first time, because they kind of go around the bridge room and they react the way that I feel like is reflected my own viewing of the cube, which was just sort of,
yeah. And they basically just say, how about we try to go around it, and it just kind of it just gets in their way.
Yeah, it's a what they're doing in the show is just, it's like the difference here between immediately that stands out between this and TNG is that this feels a lot more like they're exploring.
Yeah.
And they're on their own as opposed to TNG, which, as much as they try to downplay it, TNG seems like the Enterprise is like it's more of a military vessel.
Oh, I get the more of a cruise ship vibe from the.
Oh well, I guess what I mean is, like, you never feel like the Enterprise in TNG is really too far away from somebody else.
Right, yes.
They always seem like, even when they're investigating an unknown planet or something, they're like, half a day away from calling in reinforcements or something.
It's always a matter more of like inconvenience than danger.
Yeah. Whereas in this one, it feels like they are by themselves in the middle of nowhere, and then they've just come across something they've never seen before.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people say that TOS is about the exploration. TNG is about we've discovered the borders, and now we're going to shade in what's within our borders.
Yeah,
is the difference between the shows.
That's a really good way to put it. So this might be a tangent, but do you feel like the lack of Starfleet in this show adds to that, or do you think it takes away from it?
I like it.
I like it too.
I like the fact that they don't. I don't think they've actually called them Starfleet. They called them something weird in this episode, but they haven't mentioned that. But I do like the fact that we haven't seen another ship so far. We don't know if this is maybe the only ship that Earth has that's flying around out there. And I do like that it does give a sense of danger to everything that they're doing, and because we haven't had a single conversation where they talk to another agency. Yeah, it's like Starfleet or anything like that.
Right.
You agree? You like the isolation factor of it?
Yeah, I do, because I think TNG.
I have a hard time telling if I just I have a hard time telling if it's just because of the newness compared to TNG. So a lot of my criticism might just be sort of I'm impressed by the sort of new tone of TOS over TNG.
Well, I think it just goes to show you how different the shows really ended up being. I mean, TNG, if you're looking at them, they're not very similar as far as. I mean, there are similar elements, but TNG has a lot of stuff different about it that TOS doesn't have.
Yeah,
and Starfleet, the ever presence of Starfleet is one of them. Like, as much as I love TNG, I feel like sometimes Starfleet can be sort of like, like an easy plot device, or like they're always a phone call away for whatever they need them for, and like I do like the added aspect of the unknown and danger that, like you said, that seems to be present in TOS, at least up to this point.
Yeah, and the early goings here of what.
And I think that's gonna really add to stuff that comes later when you do have other ships involved, and it's, you know, you end up in a standoff with the Klingons or something, and there's not always the possibility of reaching out to the closest starbase, you know, something like that.
Yeah, or the ship taking damage seems like it's a huge problem, especially where No Man, where they got injured, and they're like, you know, just because if we can't fix our warp drive ourselves, it's going to take us years to get back to anybody that we know. Which is never a problem in TNG, it felt like, unless they were, you know, artificially transported some distance away that they had to get back from.
Also, sorry,
go ahead.
you just brought something up or you said something that sparked a memory. I loved the peripheral stuff in this show that they put in that they haven't worked out, and they just eventually end up dropping because it's stupid.
Sure.
They like, so compared to the Cage, they've downgraded from full on like tactical vests and belts when they go down to the planets. To just like a weird sash,
yes,
that they keep their gun and communicator in. But on top of that, when they get into the transporter, they like hunch down in like a ready position. That looks really stupid.
Oh no! You know why they were doing that?
Why?
Because Scotty said that the quarters over there are kind of cramped because they're built for that 6-year-old boy.
I thought they were I must have missed that line. I thought, because when I saw that, I equated it to in the first Abrams movie when Spock uses the teleporter, he like crouches down,
gets in
like
a ready position.
Yeah, I thought that was the same thing. I was like, wow, that's a really interesting callback. That's a good catch. Yeah, but it just looks so silly.
It does look silly. Yeah, he did it because the ceilings over on the other ship were too low.
Well, that's a lot less interesting.
So if you had to guess, right? What do I guess we can get into some of the character stuff, like what they had attempted to give a catchphrase to McCoy in this one, and he says what would become his catchphrase in a really funny scene where he says, I'm a doctor, not a moon shuttle conductor, and if I jumped every time a light came on around here, I'd end up talking to myself, and he is talking to himself when he says that line. Can you guess what his actual intended catchphrase was supposed to be? He says it a bunch of times in this episode.
Up and at them.
It's much worse. He said it's his line, "I never said that." And if you pay attention, he says that a couple times in this episode. And I don't know how that was supposed to be caught on as a catchphrase. The doctor one is much better than that.
Yeah, that's bad. I mean, no, that's not a good catchphrase at all.
I never said that. It's
like
it's like the Trump catchphrase of.
Could you imagine like a T-shirt with McCoy's face that just says "I never said that"? I mean, I'm sure they exist, and if they don't, they will soon. Now that I've said that,
it would get pretty fucking annoying right away. And I think that you know, the Bones and McCoy thing are really written well here. They aren't really antagonistic to each other at this point yet. Mm-hmm. It's more the fact that both of them are willing to challenge Kirk, especially McCoy, who comes on and basically bothers Kirk about something in the middle of a red alert, and that's where Kirk gets the idea to play poker with Baylock.
I will say the ship doctor preventing the captain from responding to a red alert because he hasn't finished his physical is might be grounds for court-martial. I'm not sure.
That's it's a good character moment though. It is. He's showing how much of the doctor. I totally agree that it seems inappropriate, but I think it just goes into there was never a relationship on TNG like Spock or more like the McCoy-Kirk relationship that they have. Right. I don't think the show says anything, but what's your understanding of their relationship from this episode? Do you have one? Do they know each other from a long way, or is McCoy just older so that Kirk is more deferential to him in a way?
I think back in the academy they were friends, and there was a girl that they both liked, but it turned out that
Nancy.
In fighting over that one girl, they became the best of friends. No, I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's it's a toss up because I mean I think you could I think their relationship is pretty their chemistry is good enough that you could say that, yeah, they might just know each other from a long time. But I think it's also, I think you could chalk it up to just being friends in a working environment for that long.
Yeah.
I think it could go either way. It's really open, and I don't think either one of those is wrong.
Yeah. And I think
is there a canon explanation?
Not that I'm sure there is, but not that I know of. I think he was just assigned to the Enterprise, and that's just kind of the way that it worked out. The show, I would feel like the show would have brought it up if there was anything outside of that.
Yeah.
And Leonard Nimoy has settled nicely into Spock, I think, at this point. Besides this sort of yelly opening where he's yelling at people or he's just yelling out orders, he feels very much like the Spock that we know going forward.
Yeah, my favorite part of this whole episode is the back and forth where he tells Bailey to cut out his adrenaline gland.
Yes.
That was great. That was like pitch perfect. That's a great delivery.
That's the start. That's the first time I think we've heard Spock joke about things, because in the previous pilots, he in the Cage, he wasn't really Spock at all, and in Where No Man Has Gone Before, he was much more of a early Data role where he's like, "What does irritating mean?" And so they dropped that pretty quickly.
I did notice it's been interesting to me too to see how. I can't remember if they talk about this at all in that documentary on Leonard Nimoy, but it's been interesting to me to see how quickly Spock turned into like a second lead.
Yeah.
Because, as we talked about in The Cage, he was just sort of there, and his name isn't really prevalent in the credits. But by the time you get to No Man Has Gone Before, his name is...
He's credited, yeah.
Yeah, he's got like the featured, and featuring Leonard Nimoy as Spock.
Interestingly, McCoy is not there yet. He will get there.
Yeah. Oh, he will. Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, by the time you get to this episode, I mean, Kirk doesn't even show up for the first 10 minutes of the show.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's mostly focused on Spock, and he's running the star mapping or whatever. So I don't know if they just knew that they had a good character, or I don't know but I was surprised that he became the focus so quickly.
Yeah, he was elevated to that point so quickly. I think that it's an interesting choice that they made there. I guess it's supposed to just be that he's supposed to be the science guy who's in charge of the sciencey stuff, while Kirk is doing some leg crunches or something.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed that too.
Also, I would like to say, they cut over to the health stats while he's doing that. His heartbeat is remarkably low for the amount of effort that he's putting into that leg press thing.
It's the future. Everything works a lot better. Do you think that in terms of the Corbomite maneuver, right? We've got this sort of thing where we meet Mr. Bailey. I guess his name is Dave Bailey, who I don't think we're ever going to see again. Mm-hmm. Did you like the Bailey character? I found this to be a bit of a could go both ways in people who reviewed the show. Did you like what Bailey brought to this episode?
I liked what he brought to about half of the episode. Because I think the stuff that they did with him in the first half was good, but I don't think that his story really played out in a very satisfying way.
Yeah.
Because after Kirk kicks him off the bridge, you don't see him for a while, and then when the ship's gonna blow up, he just shows back up, and everybody kind of gives him a knowing smile.
Yes.
And he just goes back to work. I don't know. I thought that was kind of lame. And bringing him onto the ship, and because they go out of their way of setting up this whole thing where Kirk, Bones explains to us that Kirk sees some of his younger self in Bailey, so that's why he may have promoted him too fast or something.
Yes.
And that thing doesn't really get resolved at all.
No, it doesn't get resolved. I don't think it. I don't think that it's a satisfactory ending to send him off with Baylock at the end. I mean, I think that. Do you think that the Bailey story is the main theme of this episode? Is the main theme of the episode that this is a crew out in danger? Most of them are professionals, but it's such a dangerous situation that one of them is going to break down and maybe can't handle Starfleet. Mm-hmm. Is that the main idea at the heart of this, or is it more about meeting a race that you don't know and things aren't what they appear?
Yeah, I feel like it's more that. because there's no real statement or tie-up made to the actions involved. You know what I mean? Like all of that emotional stuff is there, and I really like it, but there's nothing really ties it up. It's just presented as like, this is just what happened on Tuesday.
Yes, right.
You know, they're not trying to make a point or anything, but they clearly are trying to make some sort of point about, you know, being open to, I don't know,
or being prepared for like what they're. Yeah, I mean, I thought my biggest problem with the Bailey stuff was that he fucked up like too many times during the episode. Like basically every time he was told to do something, Sulu would have to reach over and like punch the numbers into his console.
Yes, yeah.
And I just felt like he's too incompetent in a way. And I understand what they're trying to do, but it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And I thought that he played the breakdown scene a bit broad.
Yeah, I mean, that's about what I expected from a TV actor at that time.
Yeah, at that time,
It didn't really bother me.
Yeah.
I think what might have changed it for me, excuse me, is if he had actively volunteered to stay with Baylock at the end, instead of Kirk being like, well, I know someone who's willing to stay and won't be a bitch about it, right, Bailey?
Right, yeah. Yeah, that was weird. I also thought that we should have seen after the credits roll where Baylock, he's like, and this is my torture room where I torture people that board my ship. We don't get any of that. We just get a lot of them drinking grapefruit juice and that kind of stuff. But
or like they're walking away and Baylock's like, Bailey, what is your blood type? Why are you asking? Oh, don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it at all.
Yeah, like I think if they had leaned into him a little bit more in his fear and freak out about the alien, and then at the end had him be the one to be like, oh,
yeah,
okay, this isn't such a big deal. I would love to learn about your new culture. I think that would have been a more satisfying way to end it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it all kind of ties together, right? He's freaking about the unknown, and then they find out that the unknown is actually not at all what it appears to be, and that kind of calms him down, and he goes forward from there. I think like I was saying at the start, that's like a perfect pilot story for this series in a lot of ways. So I think that it's appropriate to do that. I don't know, like it just feels to me like they didn't really tie the stories all that well together, and like you were saying, it felt like the Bailey stuff is more of a side tangent more than what the focus of the episode is trying to get across. And if I think about it, I guess I can relate them together. It doesn't tie as well as I feel like it should have, especially at the end.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I mean, I think that's pretty much Corbomite. Did you have anything you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I had a couple things. Did it seem strange that in the classical term of plot, there is no real plot for like the first half of the show? Because it seemed like, to me, it seemed like it was they find the cube and then they're just sort of there for a while, and there's not really nothing really happens. I'm not saying that necessarily is a negative thing, but nothing really happens until nothing really happens until the giant sphere shows up.
Yes,
which is pretty deep into the show.
It is, but I feel it actually I felt that the episode actually started to get boring when the sphere shows up.
Oh, really?
I really liked the character moments that they build into the first half of it.
Well, I guess I loved all that stuff. It just seemed really interesting to me that
there was nothing driving the action.
Yeah, it wasn't. For a show at the time that it was made, it was surprisingly light on actual plot.
I guess what I would, I guess my thing would be that for the other two pilots that we watched, right, the story was introduced right away.
Yeah.
But those episodes to me felt like they dragged more.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't really like the TOS 60s thing where they introduce the story and then we just beat by beat watch the story unfold for 15 minutes. It takes way too long. So I was really happy with the sort of character moments, especially like you were saying, because they've got the characters already. So it's like impressive to me that we can see their interactions with each other. And we also get the I'm thinking I should add a segment for the show called "Hey, it was the '60s." And
there's no gratuitous ass beating in this episode.
Well, basically, there is the Kirk's lamenting the fact that Starfleet gave him a hot yeoman, so he has to fuck her. You know, like like what do they expect? Like, I'm definitely gonna fuck her, right? Like, what were they thinking doing this? And
yeah, I actually really like that. I mean, obviously, it's not a great look in retrospect, but it's kind of hilarious because he says that thing about it gave me a female yeoman. I was like, oh wow, he just doesn't like women. And then Bones is then Bones is like, you don't have to bone this woman. I'm like, oh, it's not that he doesn't like women like Pike. It's that he likes them too much.
Yes, yeah, they went the other way with it. I mean, and I feel I have to sort of say that I'm not up on my high horse. I don't morally think that the TOS was like wrong for these kind of opinions. They were sort of a product of the '60s, but I think this one's actually more appropriate than in other episodes we've seen, where, especially in Where No Man Has Gone Before, they're bringing this kind of like gender relationship into situations that are like inappropriate from a narrative standpoint. Like the ship is blowing up, and in Where No Man Has Gone Before, Gary Mitchell is like grabbing the ass of the yeoman, and it's like this is not the time for this. Like I can deal with your sort of like dated gender relationships and like sort of this offhand thing, because this is basically two buddies talking to each other, right? So it's okay there, but it is very
locker
funny.
room talk.
Yes, it is locker room talk.
Also, to answer your question from the last podcast, Gary Mitchell is the name that Khan uses in Into Darkness.
I was told it is not.
Oh,
I was told on YouTube that was a fan theory about what person that could possibly be.
Oh,
do you remember seeing it in the movie?
I thought I did, but you know what? Maybe I hated that movie, so maybe I wasn't paying attention.
I remembered seeing it in the movie too, but when someone explained it to me, I was like, oh, maybe it is just a fan theory of if he could be Gary Mitchell, and that would be how he's like a superpowered person.
Huh. Well, yeah, I don't know.
We'll go back in 10 years. We're going to watch Into Darkness anyway, so we'll let everybody know. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Did you have something else you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, a couple other things. I wanted to note how important color is in the show and how much it adds, just adding red to the palette.
Yes. So before you start this, I read a lot of reviews, and it seemed like it was maybe not a 50-50 split, but like a 60-40. Some people don't like the Technicolor later episodes, and they prefer the Cage's sort of very gray and blue look. You disagree?
Yeah, I do.
I disagree as well, yeah.
Yeah, I think it suffers from the same problem that the first movie suffers from. And it's too flat, especially for television, where your screen in the 60s is small and stuff has to really pop.
Yeah.
Adding that red just really makes the entire everything pop.
Yeah.
And I was looking back at some of When No Man Has Gone Before, and it's still so flat because the blue that they're using is such a washed out blue.
Yes, yeah, it's like a light yellow, sky blue.
Yeah, and it's like a gray sky, gray bluish sky. And the yellow that they're using is like that 60s yellow ochre color, which is a cool color, but it's not really exciting.
Right.
And the other color that they use is basically either brown or gray.
Yep.
And it's just not really interesting to look at. Whereas you drop that red in there and you jack up the yellow and the blue just a little bit, and you've instantly got a much more visually interesting show.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they've also made changes to the panels. They have much brighter lights on the computer panels and everything.
Yeah, it's not just the shirts. It's like they've added like red highlights to the ship, to the structure of the ship, and it just really makes it more dynamic.
Yeah, yeah.
And when we get to the movie, I was actually watching some of the movie over the weekend and
trying to fall asleep.
Actually, no. It started off that way, but it didn't work, so I just left it on while it's working. And that movie is it's gorgeous. Like I was looking at that movie, thinking to myself, man, the set design, the art design for this movie is fantastic.
We're talking about motion picture for everybody.
Yes, yeah. The colors that they're using, like, every shot is just this beautiful painting, but it's like a two-tone painting.
Yeah,
and it's just. The stuff they've done is great, but it just doesn't have that. It doesn't really draw you in. It's that same blue, gray, kind of washed out brown thing.
Yes.
which looks great when you're looking at it in the way that all the colors work together. But as far as something that you actively, find exciting, it's not really there.
No, and I mean they're still going to tinker with it because Uhura in this one is wearing the gold. She'll move to red shortly. Yep. But it's nice when you see a bridge shot and there are little specks of color throughout. Yeah. It's like each person is sort of at their station, which is built for the camera, obviously. Mm-hmm. And you can see the different colors, and it gives a little bit of depth of everything to the image, and it makes it look. I think it just adds a sense of fun to it as well, where it's not just this gloomy thing from the cage.
Yeah, and I think, what was this, 66? So color TV was not brand new, but it was a little bit more new. So I think they were still kind of shaking out what worked and what didn't work, because the original version of the original Cage pilot, if you dropped it into black and white, you wouldn't lose anything.
Right, yeah.
It would be the exact same thing. Whereas this feels like a completely different experience if you were to watch it in black and white versus color. And I think going a little bit overboard with the color early on was a good idea, because it's definitely shows you how the technology is really different,
Yeah, yeah.
One other thing I wanted to ask. I don't know if you guys talked about this at all. Do you think Kirk is too young?
No, I don't. I don't think so, because I think that for the tone of like his sort of way of dealing with problems, I think you need to be a little bit hot-headed.
Yeah,
and that might be the kind of difference between Picard and him, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think that the way that they write Kirk is that Modi mentioned this. Kirk is like, he's someone who's like, he's going to take responsibility into his own hands, where Picard is more of a good delegate type thing, where he's going to delegate responsibility to people.
Right.
Kirk needs to have that sort of youthful, I'm going to go down and punch the god in the face kind of thing. And I think he has to be younger. And like, what would he be in this? 30? You think like...
Yeah, he's got to be. I mean, Shatner's in his 80s now, I think. So
yes.
He's got to be in his early 30s.
What would you have thought Picard was supposed to have been? I don't know what their actual ages are when they have started this. Would you thought Picard is like mid 40s to 50, or is he younger than that?
I have always felt. I mean, I don't know if it's just because he's bald, but I always felt Picard was like latter half of 40.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Kirk is interesting, because this is the first time in a while that I've gone back and I've watched original series Star Treks, and my memories of Kirk are more based in the movies than the show anyway, where he was older.
Yep. And that's a huge theme of all of the movies.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I guess, when the Abrams movies came out, that was the one thing that really kind of stuck out to me initially, was I felt like the whole cast was too young.
Sure.
Especially Kirk, because I know he's supposed to be a hothead. I know he's supposed to be, more brash and action-based than Picard is, but I don't know. He just seemed too young. And in the movies anyway. And so watching this, I was kind of thinking maybe he just looks younger than he is, but his actions, he feels like a confident captain. Like I don't think his actions feel disingenuous or anything.
Right.
But there's just something about him that seems like, I feel like if he was 5 years older, it might land a little better.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say land better, but there's maybe watching more of them, it'll
settle in to where
it'll settle in a little bit more.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I feel he's well played.
I guess
not well played.
Especially when in this episode, where a big part of the story is recognizing some of your younger self in a crew member.
I can see that,
where the crew member is basically maybe 3 to 4 years younger, if that, if they're not actually the same age.
Right. Yeah. I can kind of understand that. I feel that he's a little bit young to be. Well, it's kind of a toss-up, right? Because he's young enough of a captain to be promoting people inappropriately, but he's not old enough to see someone who's like a year younger and be like, I remember when I was that young. I'll change that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Like, if I had to guess, I'd probably say Shatner and the guy who plays Pike are probably comparable in age, but Pike just seemed older to me.
Yes, I would think so. I'm going to actually look up Captain Kirk when he becomes captain. He was 34 when he became in canon.
Okay.
So, yeah, maybe I'm thinking he's a little bit younger, but 34. And let's see, how old was Picard when he became captain? This is probably going to be younger than I thought, right?
And, part of it might be because as I'm getting older, I'm consistently shocked at how young some of these characters are supposed to be.
And I think I've mentioned before, I can't
I would
sports.
not put myself in charge of a starship.
I can't watch sports without thinking that everybody on the field is older than I am.
Yeah,
but
sports is a huge one.
They're all 10 years younger than I am right now. Let's see. He was...
Yep.
Picard was born... What the hell is he? He was born in 2305, and he became captain on... This is a riveting podcast. He became captain on... What the hell is it? Of the Enterprise at 2364. So 2364 minus 2305. So he's late 50s.
What?
Right? 2305. And then, he becomes captain in 2364. So he's 59 in TNG.
Wow.
That seems wrong to me,
yeah,
doesn't
that
it?
doesn't seem right.
Yeah. I would have thought he'd be younger than that. Maybe it's just the... we're supposed to buy into that they age better or something in the future.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
And
did they tell Patrick Stewart that before he signed on for the role?
Yeah, that's odd to me. I don't feel that's appropriate, but I guess we'll get into that at some other point. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about Corbomite before we go? What did you think of the Corbomite bluff? You think that's the linchpin of this episode, and what do we think about it?
I liked it. I think it's a nice.
I'm shocked by how simple the stories are. It's like it's such a simple turn. Not that it totally makes sense. Everything is totally logical about how the story plays out. Mm-hmm. It's just such a simple turn where Kirk is like, I'm not going to play chess. I'm going to play poker.
Yeah. I like it. I think it's a good indication of Kirk's character. It sort of sets the tone for all of the great sly, tongue-in-cheek ways that he wins that come up later. As much as he is a go down to the planet and punch the god in the face kind of character, he is also a great outthinker.
Yeah. Yep.
And he does so in very clever ways, which is also why this is something that we can talk about when we get to the movies later too, which is I always hated the way that they portrayed him defeating the Kobayashi Maru test in the remake.
Yep.
Because
in the remake.
Okay. The way that they show him like so nonchalantly walking through it after having reprogrammed it or something like that. Because I believe in Wrath of Khan, all he does is he says he reprogrammed it or something. He shows that he cheated. But it's not as... The way they showed it was just so... What's the word I'm looking for?
Too obvious or too...
It wasn't really very classy. It wasn't...
Okay.
The way Kirk defeats people with his mind is a lot slicker. You know? It's a lot more
clever.
Lot more interesting. More clever. Yeah, I guess that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Clever.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I guess that's an interesting point. Like, what is Kirk's weakness at this point, right?
Well, clearly it's women.
It's clearly women. But outside of that, I don't know if this actually ties into Picard. Like, neither of them have glaring weaknesses, right?
Yeah.
Which is probably a downside for storytelling. And I think the movies are actually going to get better for Kirk's weakness. And that ties into their age and everything at that point. But
yeah, I love movie Kirk. Not that I don't like TOS Kirk, but I love movie Kirk.
Yeah, they've added a dimension to him.
Oh, one last thing.
Sure.
I don't know if you guys talked about this at all, because I don't think we talked about it in the first one. How do you feel about the updated effects for this?
I like them.
Yeah.
I was looking at pictures of the unupdated, and it looks like you're looking at the image through like a screen door that has been spray painted with like Crisco or something.
Yeah.
I think they stick out, and I can understand purists being like, this isn't the way I watched it, but I am very grateful that the TOS updates exist and that the ship looks at the way it does, especially from the outside.
Yeah, I agree. I think they did a nice job of updating, but not doing like the Star Wars special edition thing.
Yeah,
where they've updated it, but they've updated it to still look like what it was.
Yep.
They haven't just been like, oh, this is a stupid thing, we should just totally redo this. They just kind of tweaked everything.
The planets look a million times better than they ever did originally. Yeah.
That giant ball thing I thought looked fantastic.
Yes, the ball thing. And actually they were talking in the documentary about even the cube. They made the cube more cube-shaped because in the original it does look like just a glowing ball. And everyone's talking about how it's a cube, so you're going like, what the fuck are they talking about? Like, it's just a ball.
Have you ever seen the episode of Aqua Teen Hunger Force where the cube comes down and starts taking money from them and all that kind of stuff?
Is it the cube from this?
Yeah, it's the same cube. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I highly recommend it.
I think we're done talking about Corbomite. Me and Clay are going to play an audio clip, and then we're going to come back and give our final thoughts and ratings for the third produced episode of TOS, the Corbomite Maneuver.
Jim.
4 minutes.
What's the matter with them out there? They must know we mean them no harm.
Certainly aware by now that we're totally incapable of it.
There must be something to do. Something I've overlooked.
Chess. When one is outmatched, the game is over. Checkmate.
Is that your best recommendation?
I regret that I can find no other logical alternative.
All right, Clay. This is a democracy in some ways, so we're both going to give our ratings for what we thought about this one. The Corbomite Maneuver. I was pleasantly surprised by this one. I think it's kind of an iconic episode. I think it's important. I think that the alien design is important. I think the ships look good.
I think it's a terrible title.
You don't like the title?
No, I like the idea of what it is, but I don't know. It just sounds... It's not very interesting.
Well, I think that the title leads me to think something else than what happens in it. Like
maybe that's what it is. Yeah,
I'd call it like the Corbomite Bluff or something, maybe to tie it in more thematically with what goes on in the episode. But I definitely, before I watched it, I was like, the Corbomite Maneuver. I think, and in my mind's eye, I had a different episode than what came out of this.
Mm-hmm. Calling the episode the Corbomite Maneuver is like you found it in a textbook.
Right, yes.
Which is, I don't know, maybe that's kind of cool. I don't know.
It's a futuristic Heimlich or something like that.
Yeah, maybe this entire episode is just a TNG holodeck episode where Riker wants to learn about the Corbomite Maneuver.
They are going to bring up Corbomite one more time, I think, before the series is over. Yeah, so we'll see how that goes down. But what'd you think of this one on our scale of 1 to 5?
I think I'm going to give this one a 4.
I think so too. I think it's a good 4. My main things that keep it away from a 5 are the pacing falls off the rails in the second half, and I think that story wise it's not quite as tight as it could have been. Where how they tie Bailey into the whole thing at the very end.
If for me, I mean, if someone was skeptical going into the original series, and I had to give them a list of like 10, this would definitely be on the list.
I think so. I really enjoyed this one, and I'm enjoying TOS quite a bit, and it might just be because of how different it is, and I like looking at them. I like looking at them analytically, like we are, and sort of breaking it down. But it's totally different from TNG, where I might have before assumed that they were more similar than they actually are. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good. A 4 from both of us. Any final thoughts do you have about this one? Anything going forward that you're looking for?
I would like to say that Clint Howard has always been creepy.
Yes,
and that's really unfortunate for him.
Do you get I get flashbacks of when they reveal the puppet Baylock. I get flashbacks of the reveal in the Bates Motel. Psycho.
Oh yeah,
it's a very similar. It's very scary.
Yeah,
that pup. I think that's it. We're done talking about this one. It's been a good hour of conversation. Anyway, guys, if you like the content, you're on YouTube, like in the comments, appreciate it. If you're on iTunes, a rating and review helps get the show out there. Rate us on all your podcatchers. You can go to facebook.com/the Pensky Podcast. Join the conversation there. Leave a like on Facebook. Patreon. We got a couple new patrons on Patreon, actually. Getting ramped up for RoboCop.
Yeah.
Go to patreon.com/the Pensky Podcast. You give a couple dollars a month, you get 2 podcasts that aren't always related to Star Trek. Sometimes they are, but you get 2 additional podcasts that you can download off Patreon. Everyone there is helping support the show, and it's very much appreciated. And I think that's it. Anything you want to say, Clay? Anything you got to plug? When's your Batman podcast coming out?
Oh boy. Hopefully pretty soon. We're finishing up. We've got a couple episodes left to do, and then I've got to edit a bunch of them down. So I would say, I don't know, a couple months maybe, unfortunately.
See, Clay,
if we're shooting 2 months ahead, I got a comic book coming out the first week of March called Red Line with Oni Press, which would be super awesome if you guys pick that up. And I think around the same time, my issue of Star Trek Deviations that I did a cover for should be coming out with IDW. If you follow me on Twitter @DeadMeatComic, there's got pictures of it, and so it shouldn't be hard to find if you're looking for it.
Is there any reason I shouldn't just buy these things on Comixology? Is there any sort of comic book backlash against that website?
No, I mean, well, I guess it depends on how you like to take in your media,
right? To
be honest with you, I'm not prepared for this discussion. If you want to have this discussion, we could probably have it, but I need some time to think about it.
No, I just didn't know if ordering on Comixology, sort of the artists complain that Comixology takes too much of a cut or something like that. I don't know anything about that. I've ordered all these things on Comixology and I looked at them, and I also ordered. One of the listeners had recommended that when we get to City on the Edge of Forever, there is a comic version of that book that I bought and I was looking at, but it's based on the original screenplay. So it's a different story, and I don't know. That was just my sort of question about it.
Yeah, it's I can't tell you from personal experience because this will be my first few books I've ever had on Comixology. But I think generally the reception of it as a way to get your books out there is a lot. It's a lot warmer than it has been in the past.
Oh,
I think digital and physical is sort of kind of starting to find a nice home where they can both coexist.
I like the way that you read them on Comixology. When you flick the screen, one panel comes up.
Yeah,
it's like it's not just the page of the book in front of you. It like makes it feel much more like it's a movie or something in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I don't care how you read it. I'm glad that people are reading comics at all.
Yeah.
I love physical comics. I'm always going to be someone who goes out and buys hard copies, but at the same time, I just found this awesome app that works with the library system that lets you. It's a mobile app that lets you take out books digitally from the library.
Is it Hoopla?
Yeah, Hoopla. Yeah. It's awesome.
I don't understand.
I've been reading comics on it for like the past 2 months.
I don't understand how Audible exists as a thing when Hoopla, you get all audiobooks from your local library for free.
Yeah,
it's really bizarre to me. I use Hoopla for audiobook listening.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's a part of the long-standing tradition where people don't realize what libraries are actually for or what they can do. I think imagine Netflix. I mean, Netflix costs $10 a month. You could get all the same shit from your library for free.
Yes,
you just gotta go there.
That's I think that the physical nature of libraries is kind of dying out, but once they transition to digital, I think people are really missing out on all the stuff you can get just from like an ebook, audiobook perspective type stuff. It's all out there and you can just get it for free. It's really great.
Yeah, no, the comics selection that Hoopla has is fantastic. And it's oddly, I don't know why, it's probably a rights thing, but there's no Marvel stuff. But there's DC and all of the other smaller companies. There's a ton of stuff in there.
Yeah, they have a whole section of audiobooks dedicated to Star Trek novelizations, which is which is impressive. I listened to a couple. I don't like them, but maybe that's a podcast for another time. Mm-hmm. But guys,
speaking of, I was just gonna say, I sent you a picture not too long ago of some concept art for that Ralph McQuarrie did for the Star Trek The Motion Picture.
Oh, sure.
That had a ship design that I'm pretty sure is the exact design they're using for the ship in Star Trek Discovery.
As far as it at least closely resembles that mock-up that they threw together.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. It's for a thing called Star Trek Titan, which they didn't end up doing, but it's a pretty interesting thing. I would recommend checking it out if you can find it.
Yeah, if you guys look up Star Trek Titan, you'll see ship designs that look very much like what I assume the ship is called Discovery in this upcoming series. But yeah, they're tying everything together. We'll see how Discovery goes when that comes out. In the meantime, I think I'm going to be watching Legion. And I think, I think I'm going to be doing sort of episode by episode wrap-ups of that.
Cool.
That airs tonight. You guys can look forward to that. Other than that, Clay, thank you for coming on.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Guys, buy Clay's book. Buy his book. Buy
it. Don't get it from Hoopla. Buy
it. And we'll see you in a couple days with The Man Trap. See ya.